Yo guys, how's it going? It's Freeslane back here, and I'm bringing you guys another Pokemon video. And in this video we're going to be looking at Pelipper, which is an old Pokemon that received quite a big buff in the 7th generation. Taking a look at this Pokemon stats, it's got 60 on the HP, 100 on the physical defense, 70 on the special defense, so this Pokemon can actually be a pretty good physical tank if it wants to be. And looking at its attacking stats, it's got 50 on the physical attack and 95 on the special attack, which actually got buffed. It used to only be 85, but it got 10 more points added in this generation, so you can actually use this as a bulky special attacker if you want. And it's also got 65 base speed, so not the fastest, but at the same time it's just going to be used more for team support. Looking at this Pokemon's typing, it is a water flying type, which means that you do have two weaknesses, and both of them unfortunately suck. The rock type weakness sucks because you have to worry about stealth rocks. You lose a quarter of your health every time you switch in on them, and it's just common to see rock slide and stone edge, so that typing it's not fun to go up against. But what sucks even more is your electric weakness, because you're 4 times weak to that, and that means that if you get hit with a move like Thunderbolt or Volt Switch, or if your opponent decides to abuse the rain that you brought and use Thunder, well, I'm sorry, but it looks like Pelipper is very vulnerable to that, and it's very unlikely that you're going to survive a hit from that. However, you also get 5 resistances. You resist fire, water, fighting, bug, and steel, and you even get an immunity to ground, which is really nice, because now you don't have to worry about earthquake. But by far the biggest buff this Pokemon received was the Drizzle ability, which we're going to take a look at in Pokemon Showdown. So Drizzle makes it so that you automatically set up rain when this Pokemon switches in. As for the item, you're probably going to want to go with a damp rock, because since you're setting up the rain, you probably want it to last as long as possible, so 8 turns instead of 5, so it's always good to have a damp rock on hand. Now this Pokemon does get access to Tailwind, which is great because you can double your speed as well as your ally's speed. You also get access to Hurricane, which is great because now you're doing stab damage in the rain. 110 base power hit plus stab makes it 165 base power, and it never misses in the rain and has a 30% chance to confuse the opponent, so it's just a great move overall. You've obviously got Scald, 80 base power with the stab makes it 120, in the rain makes it 180, so you're just going to be doing so much damage in the rain, and you also have a 30% chance to burn the target, which is great because you can definitely wall out physical attackers. Also, this Pokemon gets access to U-turn, which is great for switch initiative, because now you can either get free damage if you outspeed your opponent, or if you don't, you can just tank a hit and switch out into whatever you want and get a safe switch into a sweeper or just a different Pokemon that you want to bring out onto the field. Looking at the EV spread, what I figured you probably want to do is maybe go full HP investment and then go invest special defense, 252 EVs there, and then give yourself a positive defensive nature, so probably like a bold nature to increase your physical defense and lower your physical attack. And you can just throw the rest of the EVs into speed. But basically what this allows you to do is this allows you to be a mixed wall, so you can tank both physical and special attacking hits, and at the same time you're also able to burn your opponent with Scald, so if you do actually manage to burn your opponent, you're only taking half as much damage from the physical attacks anyways, so you can definitely be a wall, and it's just great for support. However, Pelipper can also be used in a more offensive way. Pelipper can definitely hold its own, especially with that special attacking buff. So what you can do is you can run the same ability and item, but instead maybe go for kind of a different EV spread, max out the HP, but this time max out the special attack, go for a modest nature, and this time give it Hurricane like in the last set, but also Hydro Pump, which is a bit more damage than Scald. It's a bit less reliable, and it doesn't have the side effect of burning or a side effect in general, but at the same time it's just a bit more damage, and under the rain and stab, that's definitely going to add up, and it's just going to be doing so much damage to your opponent. You also get access to Ice Beam, which is great against grass types and other flying types, and just anything that would normally wall you out, like maybe a dragon type or something. It's just great to have, and it's also got that 10% chance to freeze. And you've also got Roost if you want sustain, or you could run Tailwind here just so you outspeed your opponent and you can just turn into a sweeper. Now I did want to bring up a point. Politoed is the only other Drizzle user we have in the game if you're not counting Kyogre. So if Kyogre is not allowed, you're only going to be seeing either Politoed or Pelipper, and I just wanted to make a quick comparison here. So stat wise and type wise, Politoed is probably a bit better, because comparing the HP, Politoed has 90 base HP, whereas Pelipper only has 60. And as for the defense and special defense on Politoed, it's 75 and 100, which is kind of what Pelipper has, except switched around. And it's actually better for Politoed, because if it does get a burn off with Scald, then it makes it so that it doesn't have to worry about physical hits, and you can just invest more in your special defense and become more well-rounded, whereas Pelipper tends to be more physically defensive oriented. But that's the nice thing about Politoed, it's a bit more balanced. you still get access to Scald and Ice Beam and everything, but I feel like Pelipper just gets a bit more coverage because out of that Hurricane you're getting stabbed, you're not missing in the rain, which is pretty nice. Politoed does get access to moves like Psychic or Focus Blast, but Focus Blast is unreliable, and Psychic, for a non-stab move, it does do decent damage, but overall you're just kind of limited with what you can do. Politoed also happens to outspeed Pelipper by just a little bit, but other than that, Pelipper actually hits harder than Politoed. And the thing I really like about Pelipper is that it gets Tailwind, which can support your team, it gets U-Turn, which is great for either free damage or switch initiative, and it also gets Roost, so has instant sustain, which is something Politoed doesn't have. The only real sustain Politoed does have is through Rest, and other than that, you really don't have much to go with. So I just think that moves like Hurricane, Tailwind, Roost, and U-Turn definitely make Pelipper, just as far as moves go, a bit better, but in terms of typing and stats, I still think Politoed does like slightly edge out. But it's up to you, whichever one you prefer. When I first saw this, I thought I'm gonna probably end up using Politoed just because Pelipper is so vulnerable to electric type moves, and honestly, after using Pelipper for a while, I really like it. I think it's great, but other than that, this is just other options that you have on Pelipper. Since it is a tanky Pokemon, you can go for a Toxic set in which you probably want to run Roost and things like that. You've also got Knockoff, which you can use to just get rid of your opponent's items, and you've got Defog, which is nice so you can clear the field. And you've also got Surf, which you can use in doubles if your ally has an ability that absorbs water, like Water Absorb or Storm Drain, which it can be pretty useful in doubles and also decent damage in singles. Now, personally, going back to Defog, I don't really like it as much as Rapid Spin because I feel like it's kind of a waste to set up entry hazards and then just end up removing it. So I just prefer removing my opponents versus removing both mine and my opponents. But the nice thing about Defog is that you can use it against ghost types and pretty much whenever you want. It's completely up to you, whichever one you prefer, but personally, I like the more supportive Pelipper set. I think it just helps the team out a bit more, and it's a bit safer. It gives you a few more free switches, but that's honestly about it for this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, please leave a like, share this with your friends, and if you're enjoying what you're seeing on this channel, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.